Doctors took the brain out of his head, brought it into the laboratory, and began to experiment with it.
By controlling your mind, you can control your destiny here on Earth.
Does my TV set use more electricity than an electric chair?
Yes.
Television! Oh boy, I'm gonna be rich.
Yes.
Welcome to the Clarioncast. My name is Colin, and I'm very happy to be joined by my good friends over in the UK, James Smith and James Burrows, hereafter to be referred to as Smith and Burrows. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on again.
And me?
Today's topic is going to be about education, and it's pretty interesting because we're talking both sides of the pond here. And we're going to start out by having us, because many of us are American listeners over here, and we're not too familiar with what's going on over in the UK. So how about you familiarize us, Burrows, with what's going on with your education system?
Well, it's been affecting me from a personal standpoint in the last few years at degree level. Now, I'm not too familiar with what obviously is going on the primary school level and the high school level, which is secondary school here in the UK. But I do know that there's been a lot of trouble, in particular rioting, over the last couple of years about the massive increase in tuition fees. And this has led to, this is a source from The Guardian, has led to a clear drop in the number of students applying for university because the tuition fees have been increased from around £3,000 to £4,000 a year to £9,000 a year, which is pretty much the doubling of the fees. And so people literally can't afford any more to go. And I'm lucky in a sense because I was part of the last generation of students that only paid roughly about £3,000 to £4,000 a year. So I, from a personal standpoint, have only just got away with not paying the increase because it won't apply to obviously my year. But there are 15,000 missing applicants who might have been expecting not to sort a place on a degree course this academic year, which is 2012, according to the Independent Commission on Fees. And that really leads on to my next point about the agenda, certainly from an elitist standpoint, to decrease the amount of people that go to university and earn degrees on a massive scale. And most of the universities that people in the UK go to at the moment are what are known as red brick universities, and these ones were a relatively new universities in contrast to Cambridge and Oxford, and obviously the well-known universities that have been around for a very long time. And I think what the aim is to get rid of a lot of these red brick universities again and get the agenda back to where maybe it was around 50 to 60 years ago in this country, where there was very few people that went on to university, as most people couldn't afford it, and it was seen as such a high status thing to go to university. And I think that is one of the main agendas with the certain rise in tuition fees. Obviously there is other implications as to why they've increased it, but I think that is one of the main agendas from my point of view, and it's certainly what's been affecting a lot of students.
Yeah, it sounds plausible. During those student protests that happened in response to those hikes, did you see any give in the government as far as, negotiating or reducing prices, or what actually occurred? What was their response?
Well, because we've got a coalition government now, the thing was, I think students felt they were very much duped from the last elections because Nick Clegg promised to reduce tuition fees, And obviously, in the coalition government, he's in power with David Cameron. And I think from a student point of view, people are expecting him to stand up for students more and maybe challenge the Conservatives on rising tuition fees, but that didn't happen, and obviously that led to a lot of rioting and a lot of anger from students. There wasn't really that much done in government to reverse that effect. It was pretty much a done deal from day one.
Wow. Yeah, and I think it was Mises who observed that even when these situations occur, or even workers' strikes, for instance, when the negotiations happen and the workers or the students seem to get what they want, they in the end don't, because the inflation tax always ends up compensating and stealing away all of the substance that they retained from whatever protesting and negotiation that they did. So it ends up being pointless in the end. But
I think what this student loan system does is it ends up quite a lot more profitable for the banks that run the whole thing, because it is tying down students to literally years of debt. Whereas where one thing you had, this was back years ago now, we had the grant system where you were actually given the money to pay for the university, and it wasn't a loan. It was paid for essentially, but added interest, that is actually quite a lot more for the banks than it is just a simple grant. So that's the reason why we have a student loan system now, and then we're tied to it as well. It's not as if we can. In my personal opinion, I think a free market version would be much better. In some instances, we may have to pay for it, but at least we'll have some element of freedom to force universities to compete with each other to lower the rates.
Right. So, tell us about your personal education experiences.
Shall I go first?
Yeah, you can go first. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know where to begin, really. It's kind of it's just a natural part of life, schooling, and you just assume it's the right thing to do. Like it's what life is. You go to school, and at first it seems exciting, and then gradually, you start thinking, do I really have to go to school every day? It starts to dawn on you that what you're supposed to be learning is not actually, teaching you anything. And that's the same going all the way through from primary school to university education. It's not designed to activate and expand your knowledge, but give you specific things to remember. It's not about learning, it's about remembering things. It's remembering things for homework next week, for each individual task you're supposed to do, and for exams. Examinations are just a remembering game. So we have all these kids who have amazing memories, but can't think for themselves. Yeah,
when it comes to real world problem solving, they need an actual program to follow.
And my overall impression of later school years is one of trauma. It's just packing all those impressionable young people in a box like that, in a place where they don't want to be all day, doing things that they don't want to do. It's so much pressure from all angles, from above, teachers and the establishment, from a standpoint of fear. I think Stanley Kubrick said that where schools fail is that they try to teach kids something and using fear as the primary motivation. It's fear of not, passing your exams, therefore not going to uni, and therefore not being able to get a good job. And this is not a good environment for learning. And neither is packing these kids into sometimes 40 kids to a class, all of wildly different backgrounds and intelligence levels, in like the most impressionable times of their lives. You're going through puberty, which is a traumatic event in itself, and then you're subject to peer pressure, bullying, everything under the sun in this thing. You literally have no choice. It's institutionalized trauma, and why people don't get this, I don't understand. Did anybody enjoy school?
How many people voted to go to school in this room? No one.
Exactly.
Exactly, and we joke. Somebody in anybody's class has said, "Hey, how come we don't get paid to go to school? You get paid to go to work, and you're working, isn't it? It's just as desirable. You wouldn't do it freely if it was any worth to you."
How were your experiences through the meat grinder, Burrows?
Well, again, pretty mixed. I mean, as a child, I was lucky enough to be brought up by a family that did actually care about my future and what I was going to do, and they did support me with a lot of extracurricular activities. I mean, I used to be quite a lot. I've always been into sport from a very young age, and I used to swim for a swimming club at a very young age, and I played football, and I did all these extracurricular activities that some people might not necessarily have done because of their different circumstances. I mean, obviously parents bring up their kids in different ways and maybe are overprotective of them, or maybe to the other extreme, take no notice of them. And obviously parenting has a lot to do with your success at school, but then again, school itself doesn't really inspire you to do anything. It's very much left up to your own devices and up to the parents to decide what their kids want to do when they're older. But I mean, schools don't provide anything, because as a young boy, I didn't really have any what's the word I'm trying to look for here? I didn't have really any motivation from any of people there to take things on. Like, I do a lot of running now, and I am quite talented at it, but that wasn't picked up. They don't pick up your talents unless maybe you're a good mathematician, or you're good at very logical things, like you said before, memory related exams, and anything that's maybe thought of outside of the box, or is very creative or sporting, or you've got any musical talents or anything like that. School doesn't really pick up on it much, and I think I got a quote from Chomsky here that really does typify the whole spectrum of what school's about. And he says the whole educational and professional training system is very elaborate filter which just weeds out people who are too independent and who think for themselves and who don't know how to be submissive and so on, because they're dysfunctional to the institutions. And so obviously they tend to drive away from people's creative side and people's artistic side, and people thinking outside of the comfort zone. And it's very much a logical, mechanized process when you go through school, and that's what I've got from it. And it's very interesting that James mentions Stanley Kubrick, because obviously when he went to school he was deemed as a complete and utter failure, and he went on to be one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and that really says a lot. Yeah, exactly, yeah, and a great chess player too. But I mean, there's obviously loads of other examples. There's Albert Einstein, he was deemed as a failure. John Lennon, Charles Darwin, Steven Spielberg, Beethoven, Newton. Like, the list is endless. All these people were deemed as below average at school, and they went on to become great people and the pioneers of society. And that to me says it all about how the educational system has just got it all wrong.
Absolutely.
And even creative, so-called creative subjects like art, there is still an awful amount of just arbitrary stuff which goes along with it. For example, in your coursework, you have to provide, so many secondary artists, so many different medias, and then for each individual piece of work you do, you have to write an evaluation about what you learned doing it, what mistakes you made, what you would do in the future, blah blah blah, and then a whole evaluation for the whole thing, and then your final piece is supposed to be like a conclusion, like an essay, like of everything you've done in the coursework. And when you have all these things together, that's exactly the opposite kind of mentality an artist has. An artist is completely spontaneous. They find some piece of inspiration and they'll lock themselves away for months at a time, and it'll be like their sole purpose in life until it's done. It's not, okay, I need to do this, this and this, like a mathematical equation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every single subject, even creative subjects, are built like this, and it's absurd.
That reminds me of a quote from Miles Davis. He says, "I'll play it and tell you what it is later." Exactly. Yeah, that kind of just typifies what you're saying.
Yeah, he didn't sit down and say, "Okay, let me see the bars and put that there." No, he just did it.
Exactly.
So overall, Burrows, you had a mixed experience where the good parts, what I'm hearing, were generally the things that are attached to the crappy core, to get people to sort of accept, the forced detainment.
Definitely. If it was left up to my own initiative, and if I didn't have such a supportive family, I would definitely I wouldn't have got to college, I wouldn't have got to university, I wouldn't have had as many interests or anything, and I'd be in a totally different predicament as I am now. If it was all left up to the educational system and there was no other external factors, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be talking to you lot right now, basically. But yeah, I'm thankful for that in the sense that I've had a good upbringing. But there's like another point that I wanted to put across about certainly high school here. I don't know how it is in America, but at high school level, we're taught like numerous amounts of separate subjects: history, geography, sciences, maths, so all the basic ones. But it's surprising that the topics that aren't taught, or maybe unsurprising, which way you look at it, are politics, economics, sociology, or philosophy, or any of these topics that I think everybody should be educated about, certainly on a basic level, before they leave school. I mean, how can somebody vote or have any knowledge about the voting system if they've had no teaching of politics or anything like that at a school level? And I think that's something the education system fails on a lot. Everything's just really basic stuff that you're taught to read, write, add up, and that's basically it. And that's done obviously for a reason, to keep everybody in a dumbed down attitude, so they can go out and most of them be job fodder at the service sector nowadays. But obviously a while ago it would have been more production line mentality jobs. But I think that's one of the reasons they don't want people being able to critically think about politics and sociology and have a wider perspective of the society that they're living in.
Yeah, well, the U.S. has a slightly different approach. Instead of completely cutting those classes out altogether, which I guess they do in some high schools, but typically they keep them in and they use it as an opportunity to indoctrinate the students on that subject. But yeah,
it's totally different here. We don't. I mean, I don't know whether James was any different, but we never had any politics classes or sociology classes. All that was taught at a much later level if you went on to study it at A level.
Yeah, we had very rudimentary politics classes that were part of general studies at A level. In general studies, I cannot tell you the motivation for the creation of general studies. It's like a mixture of social issues, maths, politics, but it teaches you only the basics of how Parliament works, for example. And I get out of school, and then I start researching this kind of thing, and then I'm thinking, why didn't they tell me about any of this stuff? Why did the subtler details between left and right and things like that? What government actually came from and everything like that? No, nothing. It's just assumed. It's like, this is the way we live. This is the status quo, and there's not much you can do about it. And this is what you can do, and this is what you should consider when voting for your candidate. Bye.
Yeah, exactly. That reminds me a lot of a class that I was in at A level. It was a history class, and talking about right and left wing. One of the teachers came out as like a joking question, like to get the ball rolling, as it were, because we were doing Russian history from the 1800s through the 20th century, and she just wanted somebody to come up and say, can anybody tell me, right, what is the fundamental, what is the difference between left wing and right wing? Can somebody, just tell us the ins and outs? Has anybody got any idea at all? And I just thought, well, I knew at the time. I wasn't at the time as educated as I am now, but I was, literate enough to know what the two were, as anybody should be if they've, just got a really basic idea of politics and any ideological studies, and the whole room was silent for ages until I had to crop up and basically just say, well, this, that, and the other, and I was so shocked that everybody was just dumbfounded. Nobody could even pinpoint any ideas as to what right wing means and what left wing means, and these are the people that in a couple of years' time are going to have to come up and vote. And I'm thinking, well, what's the point if you just don't understand the basic level of politics?
Yeah, I think British people have a different approach to politics. If equally dumbed down and rudimentary as American perception of politics is, but we don't see things in terms of left and right. It's kind of very, I think it's probably even more status quo than it is in America. It's kind of, we have our government and all the things in it. We have wars and everything, and all we disagree about is to what levels do we want these kind of things.
How strange is it that at no point during government-mandated education do they teach logic? Ever.
Well, not strange from a globalist standpoint, but strange from a common sense standpoint. I'm surely that would be one of the first things you learn. That's how you decode the life in front of you.
Let me tell you how things are in the U.S. So, first, I'll go into what I see as the three main points of our current school system, and that is 1, indoctrination, 2, learned dependence, and 3, indentured servitude. Indoctrination, this is where they give you their version of history, like things like the Great Depression was caused by lack of big government intervention, and then on the tail of that kind of, school rhetoric, they, introduced things like the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, World War II saved us from the Depression.
Yeah, and that World War II stimulated the economy, and that's what caused us to have, that big government, is like the biggest and best answer to any given problem. This whole indoctrination is it's to condition children to passively accept unjust rule and detainment from the earliest levels, and to conform to the expectations of the majority that they personally assign value to. So if it's some, group that they personally feel good about, they will always go with that majority opinion, and they're not going to go against that. And there's no centered moral compass, that they're taught, or logical, method of going through problems, real life problems, and solving them. So that's a real issue. Learned dependence, it grows right out of that indoctrination. That's where they give you, they encourage the desire in you to acquire things that will enslave you and make you more subservient to unjust rules and regulations and licenses and taxes and fees and fines. Just they mentally poison you in the classroom and then physically in the cafeteria. They teach you these bad nutritional habits and these bad economic habits and these bad political habits, that there's only a two-party system, there's no more than that. And, the Civil War was really about slavery. Really simple, childish, things like that are untrue. And that pave the way for even more destructive things to occur in modern times because we don't understand history. But these types of things, these bad habits, just serve to drive people more into the arms of government in droves. The material idolatry that they promote from the beginning, you got to have the big certification, you got to have, the big car, you got to have the house and whatever, the plastic surgery, and, you got to have the vacation every year going to whatever, all that crap, This is stuff that also makes it, once you acquire all of this material, all these material possessions that you end up loving because you're in a culture that makes you or encourages you to love them, then it has the effect of being a wall against you ever standing up against domestic tyranny or resisting it. Because as long as your things are all right, and as long as you're okay, then you don't really care. So you will always ascribe and subscribe to, the safe majority. That's where your affections will go, being a coward. So that leads to indentured servitude, where you acquire so much debt trying to pay for that education, a house, car, insurance, and then insurance, and then insurance, skyrocketing grocery prices, and all the other pushed societal norms, that come and go and stick and fall and stink, that you never get out from under them, ever, and they end up crushing you, unless you have a rich family or, whatever. But the vast majority of people, the 99%, as it were, are going to be in this segment of population here. These are the same types of people that in previous Clarioncasts we've been talking about who, do not filter what it is that they partake of in their media, so their values get degraded about the things that are actually important. So they lay down when these unjust, mandates to send your children to school, otherwise, we'll do this and that and blah, 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 things like that end up leading to horrible indoctrination. So the modern education system, when you boil it down, is really just a brainwashing detainment system for children. And parents are eager for this because what is it to them? I mean, when you hear your neighbor, your brother, your sister talking about this, the way that they talk about it is as like a babysitting system for their kids, so that they can just get away from their kids for a while. That's how they treat it.
Yes, it's a recurring theme of passing on responsibility to somebody else.
Yeah, they can finally pawn off the kids for a while and have some me time, or get a job or do whatever because of all the mounting bills, whatever. It's not all bad motivations that cause this. People are really entrapped in bad situations, but whatever it is, it's a bad mentality that leads them there, whether it's something that's done against them or something that's just happening in them. So we have a system right now where these people who get so indebted into paying for their education, some are, like the video that we're linking to, the college conspiracy. We don't agree with all of it, but some good points that they make, for instance, are that, I, for instance, know people who are paying around 30% of their wages in education, just repaying their education debt. That's ridiculous. When the price of groceries is so unaffordably high, real estate is incredible.
Yeah.
They're starving people out, so that they again have to depend more on the system. My point is that parents need to change their mentality about the school system. It is not benefiting their children. It is poisoning your children. Look at the cafeteria, just for instance, of the school that you send your kids to. It will end up killing them.
Apparently, it's worse than prison food.
It is
just
worse
something
than
I heard.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, even back in the 90s when I went to school, it was pretty bad. So
you couldn't
God knows,
pay me to eat school dinner.
Yeah. So God knows what it's like now. I mean, that was that was over 10 years ago now. I can't imagine what it would be like now with all the processed foods and the artificial additives they've got and everything. It's disgusting.
So let me just ask, how often in your guys' educational experience, not in university, before university, how many teachers did you have that actually loved their job?
Oh,
I think, well, from my standpoint, primary school was a lot different from secondary school because, from my own perspective, I had a pretty decent primary school. I'd say it was a really good school, but my secondary school was pretty drab and awful. And I think everybody who did go to my school, my secondary school, would agree with me. It went into special measures while I was there. And there were all kinds of problems there. But I think, from my own perspective, when I was in primary school, the teachers were a lot more helpful, and they genuinely cared about what was going on, and it was a lot more communal, and it was a lot more. They actually did care about what was coming from the kids, what potential was there, and that kind of stopped when it got to high school level, and teachers at high school level were leaving. We had substitute teachers all the time. We had teachers that couldn't care less. We had teachers that couldn't deal with the behaviour of students when they get into their early teens to late teens. Obviously, there's that kind of mind shift, and as James commented earlier, there's a lot of changes people go through psychologically when you're 13, 14, 15. And I think that affects the teaching a lot, and especially when it's a much bigger environment. Because my primary school was very small. It was very small compared to other schools, and this is, from my opinion, how a school should be. It should be fairly small. And when I got to secondary school, it was almost 4 times as big as my primary school, and that obviously showed in the standard of teaching. And obviously teachers can't concentrate on kids as much because there's just too many people there. I think that's one of the main differences from teachers' attitude, from my point of view, from my own experiences.
Smith?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any teacher who has seemed really passionate about their job. There were some who were more engaged than others. A lot of the time it was mostly it's like a ritual. It's like you go through it, just get through it. Kind of like what you are as a student, really. Let's just get through this. But there are some teachers, and to give them their credit, they really do try. And these are the teachers who are actively involved, and almost kind of like personally involved with each individual student's learning. They're and this is much better in smaller classes, and I only probably notice this in A-level because the classes are smaller.
I can name exactly one teacher, my entire educational experience, who actually loved his job. And because he loved his job, he was really fantastic at his job, magnified all of his work. He was a retired military guy, Mr. Gardner, old black dude. I think he was a retired Marine. Best teacher that I've ever had. He would reward the students for getting right answers. He'd have this cooler in his classroom, and he would give them sodas and stuff like that. So he would give them real incentive and other types of incentive to get right answers and to seek knowledge. So my point is by drawing this contrast, that it's so hard for us to name good teachers who love what they do, is because my contention would be that not only the students are in the system that they inevitably come to hate, but teachers always over time end up hating the system as well. They become bitter. They become all the other teachers that I have known throughout my educational experience have been bitter towards their students and just bitter about their jobs. This guy was happy and thankful to be in a classroom environment with children, and not in war or some horrible other experience. He actually loved what he did. But this system is not conducive on either ends, either on educating or receiving education. So what are some solutions? What are ways that we would change things if we had the opportunity? So let's say, just as a thought experiment, Fantasia opens up and we have, we can clone, our land, only we can have the education system be whatever we want. How would it be, and how would it contrast to the current education system?
Should I go first?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, but I think that question it still comes from the point of view that there should be a system, as if it should be the same across the board. When really, I think an ideal state would be that there are lots of individual pockets of education, very, very small groups. The ideal situation being one teacher, one student. Because in my opinion, the only way you can properly teach someone is if you properly understand their way of thinking. I mean, everyone's different, and they each have their own patterns of learning, what they're interested in, what they want to do. So the best way to do it would be to have one teacher, one student, or preferably only one student, and the student does it themselves. And that eventually, you have such a powerful tool with the internet to educate oneself.
Indeed.
I mean, just speaking personally, I've learned more about economics, history, politics, even science in the past 2 to 3 years by myself, reading and going on the internet, than I have in the past 5 to 7 years in school, and including university. And that's a testament to the power of individual being able to teach yourself.
Yeah, I can second that sentiment, that I acquired more knowledge independently than I ever did through formal education.
Yeah, I think that's basically what the school system's really afraid of as well, because there was an interesting thing I saw on BBC News it's quite a while ago, it was about a year ago, about people researching things for themselves on the internet, and at one particular school, a lot of people were coming in and questioning certain things they were taught in class with things they were looking up on the internet and through alternative media sources. And basically what this spurned this particular school to do, I don't know the name of the school, because like I say, the report was a very long time ago, and I just remember the main points of it, was that basically what they did was they had these classes where they would basically, I think they were even named conspiracy theory classes, where people were basically scorned upon and subjected to intense pressure and questioned a lot and told to stud up at these classes about what they thought, and then basically shot down in flames by the teachers who didn't want them to question what they were learning on the internet. And I think that's very much something.
Talk about psychological warfare.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I heard about a year ago, and I never heard anything so Orwellian in all my life. But that kind of like that stayed with me, and I think that's what you're talking about. If they disapprove of it so much, then it's bound to be a good thing. If the schooling system disagrees with that way of learning, then I think it's a good thing, and it obviously spurs people to question things more and to look things up for themselves. Obviously not to pick any piece of information up on the internet, because there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation on the internet, and you've got to know how to research things properly and how to source things properly, and obviously that all comes with practice, and that all comes with your own individual development. So I think, yeah, what James said is really a good system of educating yourself, basically.
Yeah.
But I'm not discounting, and I'm not saying schools shouldn't exist. I'm sure there's there's places for it, and but if that is the case, I think it should be more of an active thing. Not the teacher sets the task. Well, teaches the thing, sits in front of the class and goes and writes the thing on the board, and then sets the task, and then the kids do the task. It'll be more active. It'll be more, and again, smaller classes. More awareness of who's where and their perspective on it, and more of a mutual relationship, because the teacher doesn't know everything, and if a teacher doesn't know something, they can say, okay, let's find out together. Let's go out and find out. Let's do something. Let's not just sit here and I'll give you this bit of sheet, and then you fill in the blanks, and then I'll give you a and a pat on the back, and then that'll be it. This is not learning, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a great point, because I mean, if education is to, like, from an organised level, is to be made optional, then obviously you'll have less people going for it anyway, and that will free up space in itself for more. For smaller classes, for smaller schools, and obviously the people that want to go into higher learning and university, because academic work and certain jobs are not for certain people. People have got a more manual side to how they like to do things. People have got, everybody's different. Everybody's got their own personality, and I think that once you make school optional, things will be much better, because obviously you'll have a much less amount of people going to school, and obviously that'll make teaching a lot more effective and a lot more efficient.
What I'm wondering is why I had to laugh, because I was wandering around Leeds, which is where I went to uni, and I saw a van going around and painted on the side it said Truancy Patrol. I was like, I cannot believe it. There's actually tax money has been spent on vans to catch the kidnapper from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, trying to pick up these kids who are not going to school. I laughed in the streets, because it's like a huge admission of how bad the education system is, that you have to go rescue people, to force people to go to school. It's a huge admission of failure from their point of view.
Well, yeah, I mean, at our school we had people literally climbing over the fences, and at lunchtime, because nobody could leave the school at lunchtime, we'd have people scrambling over the fences as though it's some kind of prison break to get out. And so that reflects certain people don't want to be there anyway.
Well, it is a prison. You get prosecuted if you don't go. And it's probably even worse than prison. At least you don't have to suffer the teachers in prison.
So if I had my own land, my own resources that mirrored the U.S.'s resources, then I would basically take 3 steps. The first step is that I would convert all the existing quote-unquote public schools into charter schools. Some of you are asking what a charter school is, and we're going to go to Wikipedia to highlight how easy it is to learn online. So charter schools are primary or secondary schools that receive public money, like other schools may also receive private donations. My version is run off of private donations. But are not subject to some of the rules, regulations, and statutes that apply to other public schools. Instead, charter schools are expected to produce certain results set forth in each school's charter. Charter schools are attended by choice. Although charter schools provide an alternate to other public schools, they are part of their public education system and are not allowed to charge tuition. Where enrollment in a charter school is oversubscribed, admission is frequently allocated by lottery-based admission systems. However, the lottery is open to all students. So I would have sort of a modified charter system where the education up to the elementary level is general, and they teach, because we can pretty much all agree that we all learn pretty much the same essential things, around the elementary type age up to around age 10. So we learn the basic maths and reading and writing and things like that, and introduction to logic and stuff like that. What happens in middle school would be aptitude testing. So in middle school is where you get the real core logic courses and all the other things that people actually need, just core classes, and then aptitude testing. And you don't have to continue on from there, and you don't actually have to go to elementary school or middle school in the first place, because you could do homeschooling if you wanted. That's always an option. So if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to do the public system, then you can do homeschooling, your free will. But during the middle schooling, the aptitude testing would show the individual what it is that they excel at. And it doesn't drive them to go in a particular way, but it will help them to realize what it is that they do excel at. In high school, I meant to say that the middle schools will be for primarily aptitude testing and development, and that the charter high schools will be the magnet schools. So in other words, once the children in middle school understand what their aptitude is, they can determine with themselves and their parents what magnet school they want to go to. Like a sciences school, or if it's an athletic school, physical sciences and things like that. It would depend. And then the current college system is replaced by the apprenticeship system. So after high school, once they've received their magnet education, which focuses more fully on their area of interest, then based off of the work that they do there and how they shine, they may gain the interest of someone who's well respected in the field that they want to go into. And at that point, people would be putting in their applications for apprenticeship. But some few others, based off of their extraordinary performance, would be approached for apprenticeships. So imagine you're a newly graduated magnet high school student, and you're approached by one of your favorite filmmakers because they've seen the work that you did at your creative high school, and they want you to apprentice under them for 2 years or so, however they work out the apprentice system. That's the type of system that I would much rather have over our current system. The second thing would be promoting online education, and the third thing is to revive the apprenticeship program. So after middle school, you would be thinking about, what do I want to go into as a profession? There's no profession that exists today, whether it's, doctor or lawyer, janitor, whatever, that couldn't use or be converted to the apprenticeship system, which promotes the same type of education that Smith is talking about, more one-on-one, individual education. And the certification and competency is actually based on work that's done. It's not off of arbitrary certifications from boards, whose only value is on the price tag that's attached to it, rather than how good the work actually is. Artisans, crafters, doctors, lawyers, they're renowned for the quality of work that they do, not the price tag of their education. So that's basically what I would go to. As far as promoting an online education system, most of these things could be done, online. You could have elementary schools, and the middle schools online, and again, if they didn't want to do that, then parents could take over, the schooling and do homeschooling, but that's how my system would be. And what I see would happen, what I predict would happen, if you could put it up against the current U.S. system, my industry in my nation would be much more improved. It would sprout and flourish, and I would eliminate secret combinations, or in other words, conspiracies that we have to the point right now, because we all know that the main recruiting sector that they take is from the current university system. Where they form the secret societies, and then they get recruited out of those into higher secret societies. But in this system, you don't have such a structured, government-controlled education system that is all about their indoctrination and putting value on things that have no value.
It's certainly a better idea than the system in place at the moment, I'll say that.
I think you got it right with those aptitude tests, because I've been thinking, how does one chart a progression of a student? Because at the moment the examination system is obviously a complete failure, from the point of view that it doesn't actually promote learning. All it does is promote remembering things, like I said.
Right, and for people like I think Burrows was talking about, who don't necessarily want to continue on like a professional career or anything like that, if they just want to help their dad around the farm, or inherit the farm or something like that, then as soon as their middle school education is done with, whether it be homeschooling or going to the public school system, the charter school system, then there would be no expectation on any level for them to continue. And education to begin with is voluntary. So they can choose, in their city or their town or online, what focus of school that they want to go to. And if they don't like the focus, then at any time they could switch to another focus, to another school that is another magnet school. There won't be such a hard time switching track as there is, today, which is just to discourage people, because we know that they drive people into certain professions and certain tracks. They try to drive demand and certification in certain directions. So we wouldn't have that in my dream education system.
I totally agree with that from the more of the creative subjects standpoint, because I just don't think that the current system in place can really progress a talented person to where they want, say, with music. Because, put it this way, when you do music and you want to take it onto A-level, and I never did take it onto A-level, but I really wanted to, you need to have a specific grade or specific qualification in music theory. Now, irrespective of how good you are at creating music, or how good you are at playing your instrument or performing your instrument, or how innovative you are, from a creative point of view, you have to have this theory. Now my argument would be, well, all the greatest musicians maybe have never even relied on music theory. I mean, if you ask somebody like Jimi Hendrix to write down what he did in notational form, he wouldn't know where to begin. And this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm trying to say. They try and set it down as they do with like maths and stuff like that, and it really doesn't work. There's just a standard way of going through every subject that you want to do, and it doesn't necessarily work.
Yeah, it is a form of creative tyranny, because it oppresses natural creative instinct, which is what leads to, like Smith said, all of the greatest, like both of you are trying to make the points, at least all the greatest creations that we've got, is the natural creative instinct. You get that spark, and then you yourself have the motivation to go and develop it, no matter how long it takes and no matter what it costs. So we need more of promoting that mentality rather than the government's wet blanket mentality of, every fire is dangerous, every intellectual fire and every every real moral passion is dangerous. We need to throw a wet blanket over it. So we got to get away from that. And the criminal usury, this huge student loan bubble that's going to burst in the U.S. very soon, which is going to contribute to the collapse of the global economic system. And that's soon. That's within the next year, most likely. Within the next 6 months, most likely. So, if we want to talk about, we've already talked about in every single Clarioncast, what to do in such an event. Make sure that you're preparing, for yourself, but make your neighbors and every stranger that you meet, try to make them aware of these things. Try to make them aware, because that's our responsibility, and the system doesn't change unless we have, the majority. And that's what we need. We need the moral majority.
Well, exactly. I mean, when you mention death, I mean, it's wholly there as an unphysical fear mentality, that it's just there to keep people rooted down to a system and keep people in like hopeless, stressful, like survival state of mind with constant worries and constant.
It just redirects all of their survival instincts.
Exactly, and they forget that at the end of the day, debt means nothing. It's backed up by nothing, and if everybody stood up as a community, as one, and just said, no, you know what, I'm not going to pay it, what are you going to do about it? If everybody did that in force, and there was enough communication and enough understanding, certainly internationally, from everybody, then the whole system could be changed virtually overnight. But obviously that takes a lot of enlightenment, and that takes a lot of understanding between people. And I would strongly suggest to anybody that knows what they're talking about the current economic situation and about all this debt and about how it's just credit with nothing behind it, backed by nothing, backed by no precious metal anymore, no gold or anything like that. Why are we paying it? Why are we paying this debt? And that's what people need to question.
Yeah, we put our hands over our mouths and act all modest, like we've never defaulted on national debt before. Oh, that's never happened. Yeah.
But that's an entirely different subject, isn't it?
Yeah. Closing points?
I think, again, with most problems in this world, I think it could be solved by freedom, liberty. It's the lack of choice available in our school system which has got us to this point where it's a never-ending. It's really the road to serfdom in the education system. It just keeps getting bigger and more centralized, and it's in the government's interest to make sure that we're not free-thinking individuals, because that would mean that we're going to figure out that they're illegitimate. So ending compulsory education, I think, is the number one thing that needs to happen.
From my perspective, is basically just enjoy yourself, enjoy your experience of being in the predicament you're in, make the most of what you've got, and if you're not happy, ask yourself why, and ask yourself, well, why am I doing it if I'm not happy? Do something that you want to enjoy, and strive for something that will better you as a person, and think more outside the box, instead of just saying, I have to do this, I have to go down this road because I have to earn money, I have to go and get this degree, I don't really want to do that, but I've got to go down this road anyway because it's going to earn me more money. Don't do that. What do you enjoy yourself as a human being, as you experiencing things? That's the whole philosophy that I agree with, and I think a lot of people that go to school they need to enjoy it, and if you don't enjoy it, what is the point in going? That's my final point.
And I would agree with that.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, both of you. Don't become indebted to the current education system. Don't waste your time on it either. Instead, learn real things that you can learn anywhere. We live in the age of communication nowadays, the age of the internet, where you can take personal responsibility to learn anything that your heart desires. Literally anything you could find if you just have the diligence to search for it. And I tell you, to take one step in the right direction. I've been to college, I'd say, 5 times now. I've never found even a speck of the fulfillment that I found in one lecture that I've received from libertyclassroom.com by Tom Woods and others. So that's a good place to start if you want to start educating yourself about the philosophy of liberty, and they have lots of other good courses on there as well, history and logic. Great resource to check.
I would agree with that. I'm also a customer. It's all like really good stuff. You're gonna need to you'll want to listen to it over and over again just to make sure you've got everything, because it's like a breath of fresh air.
So in the end, spend your time and your money learning stuff that's actually going to help you. Learn how to grow your own food and teach others everything that improves your own life. Otherwise, it's useless. So we'll leave that with you, and we thank you for joining us. Next time on the Clarioncast, we're going to be having Yahad of Yisrael on, and we're going to be talking about the nature of conspiracy from both a spiritual and temporal standpoint. Thank you, James Edward Burrows, and thank you, James Smith. See you next time.
Thank you very much.
How can I tell how many customers will order chicken burgers today? I'm not a magician.
Why are chicken burgers such a problem?
I figure you believe you're descended from an ape, you're gonna act like an ape.
Look man, act man.
Accept your liabilities. Cultivate your assets. Cultivate your assets.
You're gonna act like an ape.
Cultivate your assets. Cultivate your assets.
You're gonna act like an ape.
Cultivate your assets. Cultivate
pancakes with lemon. Eat their pancakes with lemon. More civilized peoples eat their pancakes with lemon. Eat their pancakes with lemon. Eat their pancakes with lemon.
Make sure you look neat.
Oh, yeah.
Bicycles don't get stuck in traffic. Bicycles don't get stuck in traffic. Did you ever think of that?